Good evening, everybody. Welcome. So excited to see familiar faces and some new faces. This should be a wonderful evening tonight. We really appreciate you coming. Always love to have folks come and tell us about history of food and wine. Tonight we have an absolute expert on California wine. I'm very excited to hear what Michael has to say tonight. So this is the Walt Klenz lecture for, oh geez, I have to change my glasses to read. It just happened to me, like, last month.
Must be 39.
So my name is Ned Spang. I'm the director of the Robert Mondavi Institute and an associate professor of food science here at UC Davis. So happy to welcome Michael Mondavi, founder and chairman of the Michael Mondavi Family Wines and Folio Fine Wine Partners. I'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have question and answers actually throughout the discussion tonight. So if you hear something that's interesting or you want clarification or you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll pop up and pass you the microphone. Please wait for me to get to you with the microphone because otherwise the recording will not pick up your question, and we want audiences at home to understand the questions. So wait for staff to bring you a microphone before you ask your question. A little bit about the Robert Mondavi Institute. Our mission is to educate the public on current food, wine, and brewing topics and to highlight UC Davis's research in this field. With that goal in mind, the Walt Klenz Lectureship series was established in 2005 through a pledge originally made by Beringer Blast Wine Estates to honor CEO Walt Klenz upon his retirement. Walt always comes to these events. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight. He had a conflict that he could not change, so this is one of the few he's missed, and we will miss Walt. The endowment supports a biannual lecture hosted by the Institute and sponsored by Treasury Wine Estates. The series brings world-famous winemakers, such as Michael, and wine industry professionals to the UC Davis student body and the community to share their unique perspectives. The goal is to help educate our budding winemakers and the public about the important issues that the wine industry faces after the wine is made. I can think of no better person to give a lecture on wine and business in the current moment than Michael Mondavi. I've had the honor of visiting with Michael both here in Davis as well as up in Napa over the last year, and have truly enjoyed listening to his stories that cover the full trajectory of wine history. He has such an incredible amount of knowledge about winemaking and the business of wine that I think he could easily give a weekly lecture for the next many years without covering the same topic twice. So very much looking forward to the discussion this evening. And it really will be a discussion, so feel free to participate. Raise your hands at any point and we'll make it a discussion. So start thinking about your brilliant questions now. Also, we are delighted to share 2 wines from the Michael Mondavi family tonight. They were kindly donated by Michael, and they are wines close to his heart. The 2023 Oberon Los Carneros Chardonnay is produced from the Napa side of Carneros region and made by Tony Coltrin, the winemaker who has been working for Michael for more than 50 years and still producing world-class wines. The 2021 Emblem Cabernet Sauvignon is a blend of 85% Cab with a touch each of Petit Verdot and Petit Syrah, and a nod to the family's legacy and reputation for making exceptional Cabernet Sauvignon in Napa Valley. It's the perfect Tuesday night wine. And what night is tonight? So thanks again for the wine, Michael, and agreeing to chat with us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, Ned, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I would like to introduce my wife, Isabel, and our son, Rob, who are with us tonight. If you liked the Cabernet, it's his fault. So, again, it's a real pleasure to be here. When I was invited to speak at the Walt Klenz presentation, I was thrilled because for over 15 years, Walt was president of Beringer the same time I was president of Robert Mondavi. And a very interesting thing happened. We were friends. We were both in the Napa Valley Vintners together, and we were always trying to build. And one quarter, Beringer was ahead. The next quarter, we were ahead. An interesting thing we found. When we worked together to build Napa Valley and to build the wine, not our brand, we both excelled. And it was like a 2-piston engine that we were working together, and it's just an honor to be here at the Walt Klenz lecture series, and thank you for the invitation. I'm going to start with the early years in Napa, and again, please, if you have any questions or comments, do raise your hand because monologues can get boring. And so starting in 1838, George Yount established the first vineyards in Yountville. It was called Paradise. He felt he'd found paradise. And a few years after that, in 1861, Charles Krug founded the first winery in Napa Valley. Only a few years later, in 1880, C.W. Crabb brought in 400 grape varieties to the Oakville area in the Tokelon Vineyard to experiment with different varieties and rootstocks to see what would be best for Napa Valley in California. In 1888, we went from the first winery at Charles Krug in 1861 to 140 wineries in Napa Valley. There were 15,800 acres of vineyard in Napa Valley, and that's really kind of a mistake. Most of the vineyards were the hillsides, not the valley floor. The valley floor was too fertile and too rich for row crops, for prunes, for walnuts, etc. So most of those vineyards in the early years were in the hills. And if you drive through Napa Valley and look up in the hills from the floor of the valley and see areas where the forests had been cut out decades ago, that's where those vineyards were way back then. 1890, this nasty little pest called phylloxera came in, and we went from 15,800 acres 2 years before to 2,000 acres. The 140 wineries, almost all of them went out of business. If that isn't bad enough, 1920, what happened? Prohibition. Prohibition is the best thing that happened to the Mondavi family. And I'll tell you why. My grandmother and grandfather immigrated from northern Italy to Virginia, Minnesota. He worked in the mine. They rented a big house. She had a rooming house to take care of the miners. And he then started working in a general store, restaurant, bar in 1919. In 1920, Prohibition, the owner of the store went to my grandfather and said, Cesare, you know about grapes and wine. I want you to get on the train, go to California, buy grapes, winemaking supplies, because it's legal to produce 200 gallons of wine per household per year. Thank God for Prohibition, because it brought my grandparents to California and then to Napa Valley. The Great Depression was right on top of that, from 1929 to about 1939. You think we have trouble now in the wine industry? This is, we have some problems, but compared to what they went through, 1933, repeal. So all of a sudden, the grape growers and the grape and winemaking supply shippers are still shipping grapes and winemaking supplies, but they start producing wine. The modern way of selling wine in America was not by selling it in a bottle. It was by selling it in 15,000-gallon railroad tank cars or 50-gallon barrels, where it would be shipped to the regional wholesaler bottler who had their own brands. 90+% of all wine sold in America in that era was sold in bulk to the regional bottlers. They had their own labels in Texas and Boston and wherever. There were a few labels, Gallo, Cella, Italian Swiss Colony, that were national, but they were very small compared to the main production. In 1937, my grandfather went from just grape shipping to also shipping bulk wine. He asked my father in 1937, when he graduated from Stanford, to go and manage a winery in St. Helena called Sunny St. Helena Winery, which is now Maryvale. And that winery had no filling equipment, no bottling equipment, no corking. It was 100% bulk wine. It was going very nicely until 1942. The government gets involved again. I love the government. Wage and price controls. They froze the price of wine, the commodity, at 12.5 cents a gallon. It cost my grandfather about 8 or 9 cents a gallon to produce wine in the San Joaquin Valley. It cost my father about 13 or 14 cents a gallon to produce wine in Napa. And so he and other people in Napa and Sonoma realized the only way to not go broke is to convert the commodity to a consumer product. And my father believed he could sell Napa Valley Cabernet at 25 cents a bottle. 5 bottles to the gallon, $1.25 a gallon versus 12.5 cents. That works financially. So the wine industry, because of the wage and price controls, started converting from almost everything sold in tank cars to an avalanche of new branded wines being bottled at the source. If I don't follow the notes, I'll miss 20 or 30 years. In 1943, because of the wage and price controls, my grandfather and family bought the Charles Krug Winery, and they were in 3 businesses: bulk wine and tank cars, Charles Krug Napa Valley wine, and C.K. Mondavi gallon and half-gallon jug wine. And that is how they balanced the industry literally for the next 50 years. The bulk wine business kept shrinking. The C.K. and Charles Krug business kept increasing. And they weren't unique. In Sonoma County, Sebastiani and Buena Vista and others were having similar transition, if you will, from a commodity producer to a wine producer and a fine wine producer. In 1944, the Napa Valley Vintners were formed. There were 7 original members of the Napa Valley Vintners. Their objective was share all of our knowledge in viticulture, enology, winemaking, and marketing with each other so we could all make better wine and do a better job of educating the public about Napa Valley wines. In the 1950s, there was a greater increase by the American public in wine. Why do you think it was? World War II. The men and women who served in Europe in World War II enjoyed wine with their meals. And when they came home, they went, wow, a little glass of red wine with dinner's kind of nice. And so the wine business started gaining more popularity throughout the 50s. 1966, my father and I started the Robert Mondavi Winery with 2 grape grower partners. The original design, 25,000 cases, maybe ultimately doubling in a few years to 50,000 cases a year. We had 3 employees, my father, myself, and 1 other person, and then would have some assistance during the harvest. But we were just bare bones, and my father had the vision, and I had the energy, and we were a great duo. My father's idea was, let's create a winery that's not just a production facility, but let's invite people and help educate them about wine. And so we had half the winery was really hospitality and the other half the production area. We put a sign on the north and south end of the entrance. And in 67, 68, in the summers, the traffic would be going back and forth on Saturday and Sunday. Nobody came in. So I got in my truck and I went a mile south to Oakville, turned around and went very slowly, not at 55 miles an hour, at about 25 miles an hour, going that mile to the Robert Mondavi entrance. I put my arm out, the signal on, and made a slow grandfather turn into the winery. And about half the time, one or two cars would follow me in. And I'd jump out of my car and I'd go, "Welcome to the Robert Mondavi Winery. Can I give you a tour?" I probably did that 150 or 200 times in a 3-year period. And we've created a monster. I mean, try to get a reservation for a tasting in Napa now. It's nuts. Anyway, wine consumption started increasing. From 1950 to 1970, wine consumption in the United States tripled. There's no other food or beverage that had that growth spurt in that short of a period of time. 1970 to 1974, because of that growth, many vineyards were planted where they shouldn't be planted. Private equity groups were investing in vineyards because of tax advantages. Breweries, soft drink companies, food companies were investing in the wine business. Kind of sound familiar in the last 20 years? And all of a sudden, flash forward a few years, a surplus of grapes and a surplus of wines throughout California. Followed by 1974, you think the interest is bad now? 16% interest in 1974. And all of a sudden, this great wine business that was growing, the brakes went on. We at Robert Mondavi followed my grandfather's and father's model at the Charles Krug Winery of we were selling wine in bulk. So we'd harvest in September, sell it in November, December to other wineries. We then had Robert Mondavi Napa Valley wine. We had a contract for 300,000 gallons to the Geyser Peak Winery in Sonoma, owned by the Schlitz Brewery. 5-year contract starting 1973. 1974, I take the samples over and they say, "We're not buying any wine, we're breaking the contract." And I go, that'll bankrupt us. And so I brought the samples home, made a composite blend of all the red, composite blend of the white, and went to my father and said, "Dad, why don't we copy what you and your father did at Charles Krug, but not call it CK or RM? Why don't we call it Robert Mondavi White Table Wine, Robert Mondavi Red Table Wine?" And we did that, and we were able the next year to sell 125,000 cases of wine in Magnum bottles with a cork, where 60% of the wine sold in the United States then was in a half-gallon jug with a screw cap. We did something different. Our wine was dry. It didn't have a lot of residual sugar. It invited people to have a second or third glass because it tasted good. And because of the Geyser Peak canceling of the contract and going into survival mode and having to be creative and come up with something that had been done before but differently, that morphed into Woodbridge, the first 10 million case brand in the United States. And so sometimes, and I think it's apropos of today, people are wringing their hands, it's a very difficult market, etc. Be creative. Think about new and better ways of doing something. Go back, study history, see what worked then, see how you can bring it in to the new modern world. Questions? Yes. Right here.
Hi, I wanted to comment on that, the red and white wine you just mentioned. When I was a grad student many years ago, we called that Bob Red and Bob White.
Yes.
There may be other people in the room who remember that.
Yeah.
I've been planning a tasting of historic wines and would like to pour a wine which represents those. So my question is, if I wanted to buy a wine in the market today that tasted somewhat like Bob Red, what would you suggest?
What I would suggest is we follow up afterwards, and I'll give you a bottle.
Wow.
It's a little old now, but you might as well try the real thing. Actually, the Oberon Cabernet is a Napa Valley Cabernet that is stylistically very similar to what the Bob Red tasted like. Yes, in the back.
I just had a similar question because talking about corks on instead of the jug with the Stelvin. Do you think that like Napa or America generally is ever going to be ready for the Stelvin?
I'm not clear on the question. Repeat.
So using a screw cap, do you think like Napa generally will ever be okay with it? Because I've never really drunk cork wines because since I've been born, they've never been a thing.
I think that screw caps, for most wines that aren't planned to age over 10 or 15 years, are the best closure. I had an interesting tasting of 1967 Fumé Blanc with a screw cap that we made for American Airlines in my cellar literally 2 weeks ago, and a bottle out of the same bottling tank, 67 Fumé Blanc with a cork. The cork had about 1.5 inches ullage, the screw cap perfectly full, and it tasted 15 years younger than the wine with the cork. Now, that's an exception, but I think that if you're going to have beautiful Cabernets, Pinot Noirs, Zinfandels for longer term aging, cork is the best closure. But if you're going to drink a wine within 5 to 7 years, the screw cap will keep it perfect. Thank you for the question. Okay. What happens when there's a glut? Again, creativity. 1976, 1978, surplus wines, wineries having trouble, California cooler is created. Think about today, all the spritzers and seltzers. It's just a modern California cooler or Bartles and James. Back then, I can remember wringing our hands. Oh my God, they're going to destroy the wine business. And then it was followed by Sutter Home White Zinfandel. Oh God. You know, both of those wines introduced the young consumer to wine. All you had to do was wait 3 to 5 years. They tasted a Chardonnay or a Cabernet or a Fumé Blanc, and we got them. It was beautiful. It was really fun. 1979, we had a great compliment. Baron Philippe de Rothschild from Chateau Mouton wanted to do a partnership with my father and I, and we created Opus One. In a very difficult cycle of the wine business then, it gave a real flash of, wow, a first growth Bordeaux wine is recognizing, not just Robert Mondavi, is recognizing Napa as a great wine producing area. And so that gave a little boost. But the problem was in the 80s, wine sales were declining. 1987, down 1%. 88, down 4.9%. 89, down 7%. The wine industry, whether it was the Wine Institute or the Growers Associations, were not investing in educating the American public about wine. The neo-prohibitionists and the anti-alcohol people were very active. And if you have someone giving you all the negative stuff and you don't stand up and counteract that, everybody believes it's true. Do you think that's happening today? Well, in 1984, we, the industry, created the Wine Growers of California. It was the first organization to have growers and winemakers in the same organization. Before they were growers and you'd always argue over price and this and that. They set it up so that one year a grower would be the chairman, the next year a vintner would be the chairman. They raised funds, and we created a marketing and educational program where we didn't just promote, we went to medical schools, we had research done, we proved wine in moderation is healthy and good for you. And we were able to counteract the anti-alcohol people who were exaggerating their claims and not necessarily accurate on their data. In 1990, to make things even a little worse, Jimmy Carter, as president, eliminated the deductibility for businesses to deduct beer, wine, and spirits on expense accounts. And a lot of the better quality wines were sold in restaurants on expense accounts, and that you could see the decrease in sales at a time when the industry needed an increase in sales. In the early 90s, companies like Nestle, Coca-Cola of New York, Coca-Cola of Atlanta, and others sold their interest in the wine business and wrote off literally hundreds of millions of dollars. All of a sudden, magic happened. November 17th, 1991, Morty Schaefer at 60 Minutes came out with a full hour's program about the French paradox and how wine in moderation is healthy and good for you, and that the French, who smoke, eat foie gras, don't exercise, but they drink red wine, don't have heart disease. And the Americans have heart disease. You could not find a bottle of red wine in a wine store between then and Christmas. It was sold out. It just added a lot. Things kept growing nicely, more vineyards planted, etc. And then sadly, the tragedy of 9/11. And when that happened, all travel, all business stopped. Hotels were empty, restaurants were empty. People stayed home and in shock for at least a year or so. The wine sales fell right off the cliff with that. That was followed by the dot-com bust. Remember that cycle? It went down. When the economy goes bad, people drink more. It's kind of interesting. But they drink cheaper. So wine's volume went up, but only the inexpensive wines went up. Expensive wines stayed at home, stayed on the shelf. In 2025, let's talk about today's problems. We have a global surplus of grapes, a global surplus of wines. The younger generation's not drinking as much as the older generations. And the wine industry isn't doing a darn thing about it. So let's look first at each aspect. Let's start in the vineyards. How can we in California compete in the global wine aspect? I predict that California grape growers will not be able to afford, at least in the coastal regions of California, South Coast, North Coast, We will not be able to afford grapes, to grow grapes for a wine that sells for under $10 or $12 a bottle. The labor is going up dramatically. A couple years ago, Governor Newsom changed the farm overtime from 60 hours to 40 hours before you pay overtime. It actually hurt the workers more because the winery owners, the farmers, hired more people, and the workers had 40 hours and not 60 hours. But it raised the cost of running a farm. Interest rates are up just in the last 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5%. Most vineyards in California historically operate on about 8 to 10% profit margin at best. So half of their potential profit margin went away with just the interest. Fuel, $5 and change for diesel in California, the most expensive fuel in the country. In South Carolina, where Rob and his family have a home, what is it, $2.80 a gallon. Supplies, glass, corks, labels, cardboard, all up 10 to 15%. So we in California are not, from a vineyard standpoint alone, going to be competitive with Australia, Argentina, Chile, other southern hemisphere countries where you can buy very nice wine at much lower price. Yes, question?
I think I can talk really loud. So I'm just wondering, is the wine industry getting active politically to deal with some of the legislative challenges, tariffs, taxes? What's going on with that?
Repeat the question.
Is the wine industry getting active and doing anything? And the answer is no.
Right.
And the reason is that the Wine Institute, which is the main trade association for the wineries, is controlled by the big 5 wineries in the state. They are all petrified of product liability lawsuits, so they won't say anything that's honest and truthful that's positive about wine, which is why we founded the Wine Growers of California 30 years ago with the growers and the vintners, so we could promote and communicate the truth about the positive aspects of wine. Yes?
I recognize that costs are going up, but isn't the bigger issue demand is going down?
I'll get there.
Okay.
I'll get there. So here's a counter argument, though. For wines above $20 to $30 a bottle, I think in the North Coast, by the vintage of 27 or 2028, there's going to be a shortage of grapes. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy. The 2025 harvest, great quality, a little smaller than normal. It's the smallest, it will be recorded as the smallest harvest in California, or in California in the last 30 years, because people have been taking vineyards out. Smallest harvest, grapes not being harvested. In Napa Valley last week, one of the large corporate-owned wineries had their mechanical harvester out. They harvested over 20 acres of Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon and laid it on the ground. I was shocked when I heard that. And the reason they did it, again, it's a big public company, they wanted to be able to say it's a smaller harvest this year. They didn't want to buy the grapes or crush the grapes, have the inventory, and then a year or two from now, write it down. It was easier to blame Mother Nature even though it was dishonest. So that's what's taking place just this last week. Let's talk about the wineries and their costs. Winery costs are up, whether it's labor, insurance is going crazy because of the fires in California. One of the wineries I'm aware of went back and met with the folks at Lloyd of London and were able to convince them that their vineyards and their winery properties were not a fire hazard, and were able to get them to only raise the rates about 20%, not 40%. So insurance is a problem. Labor is going up. Fuel and electricity, the same for the vineyards. And the supplies. California wineries, again, for under $10 to $12 a bottle, will not be able to compete globally in the wine industry in the future. And this isn't just true of California. Every appellation, Washington, Oregon. Again, 1966, there were 12 wineries in Napa Valley when we started the Robert Mondavi Winery. 3 of them only produced bulk wine and sold in tank cars. There were only 9 wineries that had branded wines. Today, we have over 550 wineries who are members of the Napa Valley Vintners, and at least another 60 wineries in Napa that are not members. And each of those have at least one label, many of them many labels. The consumer is confused. They're overwhelmed with too many brands, too many wineries. It used to be that I would be able to look at a wine list and probably tell you something about all of the wines on the list except for maybe 6 or 8 that I didn't know. Now it's almost that I can recognize 6 or 8, and all the rest are Chateau no name. Never heard of them. So this saturation is going to have to evaporate. There are over 75 wineries officially for sale with investment bankers today, just from Napa and Sonoma. And there are probably another 100 that are unofficially available for sale in Napa and Sonoma. The distributors. In the wine industry, we cannot sell wine outside of the United States, outside of California, to the retailers or restaurateurs. We have to sell through a local wholesaler. The wholesalers are pretty much controlled by the top 15 wineries in the United States because they have the strength. The wineries, the big wineries, get a contract with the distributor. And the distributor, okay, will only charge 23% markup. And we'll sell X cases. And the contract is, if we sell more than that, you pay us a bonus of $5 a case. If we sell less than that, we will pay you a penalty of $5 a case. So think about it. These big wholesalers, big wineries are in the wholesalers where we small wineries have to do business. And the distributor has a contract. One winery in California within the top 10, last year, the distributor in the state of California alone missed the sales quota in their contract. And they had to write a check for over $3 million to that winery because they didn't meet the sales quota. Now, in that distributorship, who do you think is going to get the attention? Me or the winery that has the contract that's going to cost the distributor? So we, the smaller quality wine producers, have a dilemma. How are we going to make sure that our wines are properly presented to the restaurants, the wine shops, etc.? So the distributors, and they're not all making money. There are 4 major distributing companies throughout the country. Southern Wine and Spirits, the largest, Republic National Distributing, the next, Breakthrough the next, and the list goes on. The second largest in the country, Republic National Distributing, 4 years ago bought Young's Market Company, the best quality distributor in the state of California. On September 1st of this year, they shut down their distribution in California, laid off 1,700 employees, and told 1,000 brands they had no distributor in California. So about half of those wineries were able to go to another wholesaler and be represented, but over 500 wineries in California, starting September 1st of this year, have to go direct to the retailer or restaurateur throughout the state of California or not sell their wine. So it's a very, very difficult situation. Restaurants, they only mark it up 300 to 400%. They buy a bottle of wine by the glass. It costs them $18. They charge $18 a glass, and they sell 5 glasses. A restaurant will make more money selling a cocktail for $15 than they will for selling a glass of Josh Chardonnay for $15. So we've got to somehow balance that. Restaurants are cutting their wine lists. They're cutting their inventory. And so we're all fighting for a little smaller area of representation in the better restaurants. Let's go to retail stores, clubs, chain stores, Safeway, etc. They are now putting pressure, particularly on the larger wineries, to sell them wine below cost so they can have a loss leader. I'll give you an example in the spirits end. Jack Daniel's has been always a big bourbon brand, very proud. Safeway had it as a red tag sale last week, $16.95 a bottle for Jack Daniel's. Unbelievable. And they're going to the wineries and saying, you know, you used to sell us this for $8, I'll pay you $5, and we'll put it as a red tag sale. The good news about the chain stores, just last week, the buyer for Safeway, the senior VP, was arraigned on bribery charges. Honest to God. And this investigation's been going on for 5 years. We've been aware of it, and they finally dropped the shoe. There are people on the supplier end that are under investigation for giving bribes, and people on the store end for receiving bribes. And in the next few months, it's going to really be fun. Because where people would be buying things because of payola and favors and, oh, I'll fly you and your family in our corporate jet to wherever you want to go, things like that, it's going to clean up. Is there enough good news yet? What's going to happen with this cycle? Well, personally, in my 60 years, I've not seen as difficult an environment. But at the same time, if you think about it and you get creative, it's also a land of opportunity, because people are going to be cutting budgets. They're going to not focus on the quality of their product. They're not going to focus on their customer and consumer. And those who do and can go into survival mode for a few years will be in a great position in 2026 or 2027 and 2028 harvest. If I was 40, 50 years younger, I would get, if I didn't have it, I'd go out and get financing, and I'd buy as much Napa and Sonoma quality Cabernet Sauvignon for this harvest as I could. And I'd make it into beautiful Cabernet wine, put it in tanks, not barrels yet. I just put it in a tank and let it sit for a couple of years. And then I'd put it into some barrels and let it age. And come 2028, 2029, I'll have the best Cabernet on the market because everybody else will be out because they were cutting and didn't harvest or didn't buy grapes of the 25 or 26 vintage. So I think there's an opportunity for the future because things never stay the same. It'll come back. The shakeout, yes, question.
Are you doing that?
No. I'm almost 83 years old. I'm not going to do that. He can.
So my question is, like, what would you suggest that the winemakers and vineyards should do to increase the visitation? Because I know it's just been, I was working in Napa Valley this summer, and it was just incredible, like the slowest I've ever seen it. So what would you recommend to increase that visitation rather apart from making the better product?
Well, first of all, you have to, regardless of where you are, you have to have a quality product. People don't need an education about wine to know if it tastes good or not tastes good. Put it in your mouth. If it invites you to have another sip with a meal, that's a good wine. If it doesn't do that, don't drink it, don't buy it again. The wineries, particularly in Napa Valley, and the restaurants and hotels also in Napa Valley are pricing themselves out of the market. It's terrible. And they're driving people, whether it's to Sonoma or the Central Coast, to Lodi. They make some beautiful wines over there as well. So they've got to wake up. They have to realize that people are willing to spend money on wine. They're not willing to be overcharged. Some friends of mine wanted to go visit Opus One. They did it 2 weeks ago. 2 people go a tasting. I said, how was it? And they said, oh, it was nice, but boy, it was expensive. I said, what do you mean? He said, it cost $820 plus tip for 2 of us. That's insane. Last I checked, it's still wine, not platinum. And it's, the industry has to start looking in the mirror and saying, are we charging the right prices for this? Are we giving the people the quality they deserve for their investment? And when I was young and my mother would go to a store in San Francisco, there was a glass plaque on it. And it very simply said, quality is remembered long after the price is forgotten. The problem is, we in the wine industry today are not delivering the quality so that the price will be forgotten. We've overpriced it so the price is remembered and the quality is forgotten. And that has to be changed. That has to be changed. Yes.
Hello, I am a consumer. I am new to the consuming, and we had the chance to become club members. And what do you say to beginners that are not so versed in what you do, but now have the funds to want to spend money on good wine?
I think being a club member of certain wineries' programs can be very good. I would urge that it not be at the very expensive levels at first. For example, we have a wine called Oberon Cabernet, which is the little sister, if you will, of the emblem Cabernet we have now. We also have an Animo Cabernet that's about twice the price of this, and an M by Michael Mondavi Cabernet that's about 4 times the price of this. I would suggest that younger people start with the more modest priced wines. There are a lot of them out there that are very, very good. If it tastes good to you, believe it. If it doesn't taste good to you, find another one. Only join the wine club where you like the wine. Don't worry about, oh, we'll send you this or do that. Taste the wines first, and if you like it, fine. Yes?
I have a question. I'm a consumer also. I haven't been really, oh, thank you. I haven't been really into a lot of wines, but I've dabbled. As we're starting to get information that wine is good for you in moderation, like 1 or 2 drinks, I think about like the splits that are available in champagne, and I wonder, why doesn't wine do that? Because my husband doesn't drink, and so if I open a bottle of wine, it could last a day or 2, but it's not going to last. I would love to have a smaller bottle. Why is that just not doable?
I
know you were talking about the cost of glass and all that.
The cost of those small bottles is almost prohibitive. And if you have a wine, whether it's a white wine, a red wine, Cabernet, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, whatever, if you serve it, it should be good for a week.
Yeah, I'm not.
If you're concerned about, I'll put it this way. I cannot drink a bottle of wine a night.
Yeah.
So we leave it open. There's a little rubber stopper and a little vacuum pump. I've tested that time and time and time again. I use it at my home. I have a number of them. They're good for up to 10 days. Put the cork, put the rubber stopper in, pull the vacuum. Red wine, leave it on the counter. White wine, keep it in the refrigerator. Enjoy it.
Yeah. I just think it'd be a great marketing gig, but.
Given the way specifically Napa Valley has positioned themselves as a destination for people from all over the world over the years, do you see a correction coming in their pricing and specifically in their tasting pricing based on production, or do you think they'll maintain what they're trying to do based on being a destination?
I don't think it's a production problem in Napa alone. I think it's a overpricing problem that's caused some of that surplus. People from, as you mentioned, from around the world want to come to Napa because it has great image and prestige. There are beautiful wineries in the Central Coast, wonderful. You can go to the Central Coast for probably a quarter of what it would cost you to go to Napa for a weekend. Napa has to wake up and somehow be realistic in this environment.
I think I'd add on that you have to look within the sub-appellations within Napa Valley. Oak Knoll probably shouldn't be growing luxury tier $200 bottle Cabernet because they don't have the right soil. It's too deep, too heavy, it's herbaceous. Oakville is rarefied air, Hell Mountain, Rutherford. So I think that you'll start to see, much like the first growths in Bordeaux's classification system, the pricing of Napa Valley wines in the next decade will evolve to that, where the premier appellations will fetch the higher prices because people will realize that the secondary wines shouldn't be charging the same premium prices. I think that's how the industry in Napa is going to evolve.
There are certain vineyards in Napa that Rob will not buy grapes from because they're the wrong soil. It's not because the farming isn't done well. It's because you will not have the character. Napa has over half of the world's soils types and 3 of the coolest agricultural growing zones. The coolest is south in the Carneros region, the warmest is Calistoga. By matching the right grape variety with the right soil and the right microclimate, you can produce fantastic wines. But that's probably, help me Rob, 25% of Napa, not all of it. 75% of it's, okay. And they're riding on the laurels of the 25% of the soil and of the grapes that are grown there. And just kind of finishing, I'm on the very, very soapbox. Wine is the most natural and healthful of all beverages. Who said that?
Some Greek?
No. Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur said wine is the most natural and healthful of all beverages and nature's tranquilizer. Enjoy it in moderation. And I think that because of what Louis Pasteur said, and because wine makes people happy, the products that we produce, the wines we produce, we sell pleasure, we sell happiness. And again, the key is moderation. So thank you all very much, and it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, thank you guys so much. I think if we have additional questions, we might have a little time after, or are we? Oh, we have do you mind taking a couple more questions?
Sure.
We have a little bit more time. Sure.
Thank you. Quick question for you. I'd really like your thoughts and insight on this new trend that the younger generation is drinking less, and how, if this is impacting the wine industry, and in what way?
That's a very good question, but it's deja vu. It was the same in the 70s. The younger generation were drinking less. That's why California Cooler and Bartles and James came out, because there was a surplus of wine. The price of wine went to be very inexpensive, and they could use it as an ingredient in a soft drink with wine, a wine-based. We're having a lot of that today. At that same period that Bartles and James and California Cooler came out, the industry was quiet as we are today. For the 20 years before that, we weren't counteracting the anti-alcohol people. And the young people of that era, like the young people of this area, think, oh, wine's not good for you, it's not healthy. And that's not the case. We, the industry, need to start standing up and getting modern medical research done that's bona fide, and then communicate the positive aspects of that to the public. And we actually almost deserve the problem because we've been too silent. Yes?
I started my wine drinking career in 1969 at Robert Mondavi Winery.
Thank you. You helped get my kids through school.
Yeah. And I used to always go to Napa Valley. And then I started including the Sonoma Valley as well. However, tasting fees came in, and suddenly you're paying, started out at $10, and then it went up to $20 just to get in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And one good thing happened. You had a minimum or a maximum number of drinks you could have, rather than sitting at a winery and drinking wine for 5 hours for free. So that was good. But now I go to Amador County because there's only 1 or 2 wineries up there that have tasting fees, and they have wonderful Zinfandel.
There's
and the Barberas. They have wonderful wines. So I haven't been to Napa or Sonoma in years.
And you're a perfect example of why you don't need to worry too much about a reservation in Napa for dinner today.
Ah,
People are slowing down. The majority of the visitors in Napa, I believe, are out of state and out of the country. We have turned off the local California visitors in Napa Valley because we priced it crazy. Crazy.
Hello. Hi. I'm Sarah. Thank you so much for the lecture. It's super insightful. I have a comment regarding the previous question about the younger generation of consumers that link to my question. So I do want to say that this generation, we still are spending money on expensive things. And we are willing to spend money on things that brings either, sense of identity, community, or social status. So I don't think, health is definitely the study of how wine affect health could be a contributor to that. But I feel the wine industry might need to reconnect with the younger generation in terms of branding and sense of identity that it brings. And I believe, and even with this whole cultural trend of going back to the old time and vintage and retro, wine as considered as the matured drink might have its opportunity to have a comeback. In this case, my question is related to your insight into distributors, of how wine is really hard to get to consumers. Like winemakers, hard to bring their product to the consumers. And there's so many obstacles in the way. And as a young consumer myself, I often felt frustrated not to be able to order wine directly from the winemaker themselves, whether it might be that it's a high cost or like the high minimum of free shipment. To me, like, what would you say the wine industry should do to create the direct-to-consumer connections? Is it about decreasing, finding ways to get the product delivered to consumers across the nation faster, cheaper, more secured?
I think that, first of all, it's a very good point, and I think that the wineries need to focus on the younger consumers. And just as you were talking, one of the thoughts I had is, if you're a new young consumer at, say, my winery, maybe we should have the first 6 orders, there's no freight charged. Because the freight is also a problem. And if we have wine sitting in the warehouse, and most of the wine sits in warehouses that you rent, so you're paying rent on that, and you're paying interest on the expense of producing that wine, maybe we should say, for the first X number of shipments, no charge, and then after that there will be a modest charge. But we need to do many things like that to encourage young people. Years ago, I would spend probably 2 afternoons a month at either Stanford or UC Berkeley or San Jose State or Santa Clara University doing wine tastings for either a fraternity or a sorority or the business school to try to interest the young people, the students, into wine. And I think we, the industry, need to do more of that in the future. I think we got lazy. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what your export percent is of California wine that goes outside the country. So my question is kind of twofold. One is, to what extent are tariffs making an impact or will make an impact on the wine industry? And then the other part of the question is, of supplies and things in the value chain for the wine industry, what % are imported and how will tariffs impact those?
Thank you. Let me do the tariffs first. The tariffs will have an impact in a negative way for imported wines. It's about a 12.5%, 13% tariff, but when you go through the three-tier system, it ends up being about a 25 to 30% increase in price. That will hurt the imports. It will help the domestic wines. Your first part of the question?
Well, I was wondering how much of California wine is exported versus imported?
California wines, under 10% of all California wines, and about 25% of all California wines that were exported used to go to Canada. And when Canada and Trump had a little difference, Canada took all of the California wines off of the stores, and they're all state controlled. So we just took the light switch and went click, eliminate 20% of our export sales to Canada. And I doubt if it will come back in the next 3 to 5 years.
What was the importation tax in different provinces in Canada?
Oh, the importation tax in different provinces of Canada has always been onerous on California wines. You could get around it by shipping bulk wine to Canada to a Canadian winery, and they blend it with some Canadian wine and get out of the tax. But none of those were drinkable, so it was a problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights tonight. I actually want to go back to some of the comments you made a little bit earlier about particularly some of the political and cultural phenomenon that have really impacted kind of wine sales or wine consumption. So mentioning, for example, the TV episode on the French Paradox or even 9/11. So I'm wondering, are there other kind of cultural or political phenomenon that people don't often think of that actually have majorly impacted how people drink or purchase wine?
I think Hollywood had a lot to do with it. They would have wine served in the movies in various settings. And a lot of us, when we were at Robert Mondavi included, we would make sure that the producer or directors would have wines available to use on their television or movies. The nice thing is most of the people in Hollywood drink a lot of wine. Francis Ford Coppola, with his own winery, both Inglenook and Francis Ford Coppola, helped to promote the wine industry dramatically over the last 30 years. And the wines he produced are very nice wines. Anything that can be done to show proper, moderate use of wine, the pleasure of having wine with friends, at a reception, at a pool party, at dinner, all of that is very, very beneficial. And the wine industry has not been focused on public relations. By public relations, I mean to the media, to the movie people. We had, when our family sold Robert Mondavi in 2003, so it's been 22 years, but when we were running it, we had programs to make sure that our wines could get in certain movies or programs. And we would work on that with our sales and marketing people in Southern California. And that hasn't been done, I know, at Robert Mondavi only for the last 24 years. So a lot of that education of the consumer and bring it in to part of the new American lifestyle, it's not getting the focus of many of the wineries. It's a very good point. Thank you all very much.
I think we got to wrap it.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. You really.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you to all of you for your questions, for making this interactive, just as Michael wanted. Michael, thank you so much for your talk. I mean, truly, this is what it's like to go out to lunch or dinner with the guy, by the way. It's really fascinating. So many stories, from a California wine historian perspective, from a business perspective, from a winemaker perspective. You get all of those when you talk to Michael, and so we got to enjoy that tonight. Thank you so much. I mean, truly, with the university can't thank you enough for everything your family has done for us over the last few years. It's an honor to have you back, and so thank you for your talk tonight.
Thank you. It's great.
Thank you, everybody.